Hello and welcome back to Crushing Sounds. If you don't remember who I am, and I'm surprised if you do, my name is Chris. I've been away for far too long. I've had various reasons for that. I've got a job, leaving uni, nothing special, just something small to fund my band, really, as it were, but I've been doing various training with that, and we're entering the Christmas season at the store where I work, so my hours are ramping up as we speak. I'm back in tomorrow and I wasn't supposed to be, but there you go. So I've been busy with that, and I've been busy with my band. We did a huge show on the night of Halloween at the Griffin in Bristol, which was amazing. But we had rehearsals for that as well. We got another gig next Monday, so I'll no doubt be busy preparing for that as well. So content will start to stall a little bit. I'm toying around with the idea of some sort of mini content I can do to fit in amongst everything. But my life is going to be very busy at the moment, which is fine. I wanted to be busy after uni, so there you go. This will still keep going. You just might not see as much of it, or at least not full-length reviews like this one. But anyway, enough of that. I have a load of reviews that I started but never got around to completing because I was so busy. You might see them come up again in the future. I doubt I'll publish the Dragon Force review because that's way past its relevancy at this point. And I was going to talk about the new Machine Head song, which I still might because it's fucking awful. I had a lot to say about it. I have a completed review for the new Ginger album, and I might still release that because I want to talk about that album and that band particularly. So you might see that in the future. But today we are covering a release that we at Crushing Sounds have been anticipating for a very long time. All year, basically. In case you haven't heard us mention it numerous times before, we are huge fans of the band Blind Guardian. Formed in 1984, I believe. They originally had the name Lucifer's Heritage, which is a badass name as well. Blind Guardian have since become, in their long career, one of the most successful and respected bands in all of power metal. They started originally as a sort of melodic thrash kind of thing. I don't want to say speed metal, because what the fuck is that genre title? Speed metal? It doesn't mean anything to me, but whatever. The first two albums were in that speed metal vein, with fantasy inspiration. But they quickly then became very bombastic and epic and huge, and that was where they became sort of full-on power metal as one of the figureheads of the genre after Halloween, I guess, were the predecessors to it. Anyone who's seen Blind Guardian live will know that being at one of their concerts is like being part of a fellowship, and I don't just use that word because Blind Guardian love Lord of the Rings, Crushing Sounds love Lord of the Rings. It's the apt word to describe it, although referencing Lord of the Rings is always a good thing to do. But I don't think I can state clearly enough how much myself and my brother, love Blind Guardian's music. They're probably in my top 5 bands of all time, and they're the best power metal band that's ever existed without question. There's no point in pretending or arguing otherwise. They're the best power metal band that's ever existed. It's just a fact. Yeah. This is partly due to the fact that I love Lord of the Rings. Mike loves Lord of the Rings as well, and the reason why that would make us like Blind Guardian is pretty apparent. In fact, they've inspired me to read other works of fantasy as well, besides just Lord of the Rings. But also, Blind Guardian have one of the greatest vocalists in all of heavy metal. Hansi should be up there revered among the great heavy metal vocalists. He's up there with Bruce Dickinson, Ronnie James Dio, just one of the most powerful and epic singers that has ever existed. He's vastly undervalued within heavy metal as a whole. Fortunately, he's well respected in power metal, but I should expect that. I've been meaning to make a video about Blind Guardian for quite some time, specifically talking about their discography, kind of a retrospective kind of thing. It's just a band I feel really passionate about and would love to talk about them in detail, their various albums, ones I like, ones I don't like, and why they're such an important band to me, myself and my brother. I toyed with the idea of doing it as sort of a prologue to this review, but this new album is kind of a different thing entirely to the albums that have come before, so it kind of felt a bit unnecessary to talk about all the albums that came before. You could probably argue I could have talked about the previous two albums because they're not 100 miles away from this, but it just felt unnecessary. So, will you see that in the future? Maybe. I do quite want to do it, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, without wasting any more time, new album Legacy of the Darklands. It's not a power metal album. It's not even really a metal album. Since the album At the Edge of Time, which was two albums prior, the band have incorporated a much more symphonic and orchestral sound to complement their power metal brilliance. That has now developed into this album, where all the instrumentation is epic orchestra, with Hansi supplying the vocals over the top. Hence the slight name change for the project, Blind Guardian Twilight Orchestra, as opposed to just Blind Guardian, because the orchestra are, they're the big meat of this. I think they're from Prague. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, this album has been in the making for quite a few years now. Hansi has said numerous times throughout the band's career that they've wanted to do an album like this. And with the increased symphonic elements in their newer work, this album should have taken nobody by surprise that they wanted to do it. When I heard this was happening, I was really excited. I, of course, love their heavy metal, power metal style, but I also love epic orchestral music from fantasy movies. And when Blind Guardian worked with this very same orchestra on the album At the Edge of Time, they created one of my favourite albums the band have ever done, and my absolute favourite song that Blind Guardian have ever made, Wheel of Time. It even inspired me to read the book series. This is the second one, second of 14, and they're all this long, if not longer. It's a fucking stupid length for a book series to be, but oh, my apologies, my notes are in the wrong one. Here we go. There we go, apologies just about that. Yeah, it's a stupidly long book series, but that's how much I loved the song. I wanted to read it to get more out of it, as it were. I'll maybe finish the series in 50 years' time, who knows. But yeah, Legacy of the Darklands follows the vein of the previous album, Beyond the Red Mirror, in that it tells one narrative. This one is a direct sequel to the fantasy book The Darklands by Marcus Heitz, I think is how you pronounce his name. Who knows, I might get round to reading that book if I can finish this fucking thing. The album, though, is an entirely different beast to Beyond the Red Mirror. Entirely different beast to their entire discography, really, and I don't just mean that because of the only orchestral instrumentation. This is probably the most narrative-driven album Blind Guardian have ever done. I think a lot of people will be tempted to compare this to Nightfall in Middle-earth at points, which is an album many people consider to be their magnum opus. But since these two albums share something quite similar, during the album we get numerous spoken word sections, which are used as narrative devices to advance the story or set up the next song. Nightfall in Middle-earth does that to an extent, but it's a bit different there. On that album, they weren't necessarily telling one strict narrative that progressed. They were more picking key points within the Silmarillion and using the narrative moments to set the scene of the upcoming song, or sometimes even tell a different story from the Silmarillion altogether. So it's not like they're telling one singular plot on that one, although that could be because the overarching plot in the Silmarillion is a fucking mess. But whatever, I won't debate that here. But on Legacy of the Darklands, narrative passages on this one are to progress the story. And there's one between every single song. Bringing back the same voice actors from Nightfall and Middle-earth, you have a number of eccentric characters that fill the space between the songs, and this is going to be very intrusive to some people. I'm just going to say that right now. I've listened to they are necessary though. They're intrusive but necessary. I've listened to both versions of this album, one with the interludes and one without the interludes, and the one without felt very, very choppy. This is mostly because the tracks lead into one another, such as characters speaking before the last note of a song has fully faded away. So when you take the interludes out, the songs chop together quite abruptly, and it doesn't work as well, really. So I sincerely recommend, if you are going to hear this album, you hear the complete version with the interludes intact. If you don't like the idea of voice acting interjecting between tracks, you might find this album frustrating, and but it happens a lot on this album, and it's integral to the point of the album, so they kind of have to be there. When we talk about the music, there really is no other word to describe this other than epic. You get exactly what you'd expect: huge orchestrations, epic fantasy melodies, incredible voice of Hansi over the top, and that description alone is going to tell you if you're going to be interested in this or not. It just really is epic. It is, however, quite difficult to talk about the tracks individually, since this album is one continuous narrative with the various interludes tying everything together. It's an album that begs you to hear it all the way through in one sitting. There are certainly highlights found within. For example, the chanting chorus on Dark Clouds Rising is infectiously catchy. Hansi is at his best during The Great Ordeal, and the track heard in advance of the album, Point of No Return, is just massive and brilliant and makes your hairs stand on end, really. One song that particularly caught my attention in a different way was the song Harvester of Souls. Any fans of the album Beyond the Red Mirror may notice that the instrumentation of this song is the orchestral part from the song At the Edge of Time from the previous album Beyond the Red Mirror, just with new lyrics and vocals. It was a pleasant surprise, and I didn't see that coming, and I like the original song a lot, so that was cool. I couldn't find out whether this was like an original version or if Hansi just loved the song so much he wanted to do it again, but either way, I really liked it. I liked hearing that, and I did get a kick out of singing the original chorus over this new chorus. Just it fit really well, and it was quite fun. But yeah, the album is a perfect evolution to what the band have been doing for some time now. And if you love epic orchestras, you of course have a lot to enjoy here. There's big swooping melodies, solemn build-ups, bombastic percussion. As I said, I like that music too, and I like this album a lot. However, admittedly, it took me a number of listens before I could single out the songs that I really liked from it. The reason for this is because this album doesn't dip and peak its intensity from song to song. And before that confuses you, let me explain what I mean. Yes, the songs themselves know to adjust intensity to create a dynamic range within the song itself. For example, the beginning of The Great Ordeal sounds like something out of Fantasia at the beginning, until it grows into a huge chorus and massive second half. This is all fantastic songwriting on a song by song basis, but here's the problem: every song does this. Every song drops low at points, and to then grow huge by the end. The two extremes aren't always on the same level, but every song goes to two extremes. And it makes the whole album blend together a little bit, especially on your first listen. Whereas on albums like At the Edge of Time, you'd have the massive epic tracks like Sacred Worlds or Wheel of Time or Voice in the Dark, but you'd also get the tracks like Curse My Name, which is more brooding at first, or War of the Thrones, which is just a piano-esque ballad. On Nightfall in Middle-earth, you would have the fast tracks like Curse of Feanor, Mirror Mirror, or When Sorrow Sang. But you would also have the chanting tracks like Nightfall, or the somber track The Elder. On this album you have epic, and epic again, or more epic. I get that that was the point of this album, that's the intention of telling the story, but without a track or two that is entirely there for more levity, it makes the album a bit samey on your first run. It took me up until about listen number 5 before I could start to recall almost every track by their title alone. That is a lot to ask of the listener to invest in just to appreciate the songs in their own individual merit. That this one main negative I have with the album is, I guess, is circumvented, but only if you listen to the album in a specific way, the way it was intended, in one sitting and in isolation with no distractions going on. And you have to get invested in listening to the album's narrative. You don't necessarily have to understand the narrative. I don't know if I necessarily have, but you need to get invested in the fact that this is a progressing narrative, so everything feeds together and needs to be heard as such. I understand there are people who don't listen to music that intently, and more power to you. You don't have to do that with music, but with 12 tracks and 12 interludes, this is one hell of an album you need to put time aside just for one listen, and that might not even be enough for it to really make an impact on you. As for me, I love the band, so I had no qualms in giving it my full attention for however many listens that I needed to hear it, and I didn't keep doing it out of obligation for this either. I did it because I wanted to hear it again and hear it on a deeper level. It recalls to me getting massively invested in any work of fantasy. At surface level, you may be entertained or you may be not, but you'll only make it better by investing more time and getting deeper into the narrative. For example, exploring deep into why Lord of the Rings is so good, getting attached to the characters and exploring the deep lore and backstory of the world just makes it so much better than if you're just a casual, passive observer of the story. It's the same for this album. You'll only get out of this album what you're prepared to put into it, and I know that sounds really snobby, but I kind of mean it. Your investment in getting everything out of this album is kind of necessary to enjoying it for what it is. Simply putting it on in the background likely isn't going to do it. But they touted this album is one of their most ambitious projects in metal. I don't know if I completely agree with that because A, this isn't a metal album, and B, it's not a million miles away from what they've been doing for the last couple albums. They've just removed one element and amplified another. Um, yeah, it's just, if anything, it's natural that this was going to happen at some point. I will say, however, I think this album was definitely a success and worth the wait. The band have planned this thing for quite some time, and from what I can find, they seem really pleased with it, and they even teased that they have more plans for it in the future. So who knows, a metal version of it? That might be cool. A movie adaptation. God knows we are long overdue a decent fantasy movie adaptation. uh, yeah, other than Lord of the Rings, most of them are not good. So if we can get these fantasy nerds to make a movie off of their work, it could be really really good. Who knows? Who knows? I think that the only thing that qualifies recently as a decent fantasy adaptation would be Game of Thrones, but that fucking went downhill, didn't it? Anyway, and I think being fans of fantasy, of epic fantasy, Blind Guardian would probably derive tremendous pleasure from knowing that their album isn't surface level and invites and sometimes even demands investment and passion from the listener to get everything that they can out of it. So yeah, that's the new Blind Guardian album, one I've been waiting for a long time, and I'm not surprised that it it requires the listener to really, really get invested in what you're hearing because it's just so huge. I think there are issues with dynamics not being explored um, in the album as a whole. They're more concerned with the track by track basis rather than the album as a whole with the dynamics. But other than that, this is a fantastic album. They might tour with this, they might not, I don't know. It would be incredible to see some of these songs live with a full orchestra, so we'll have to wait and see on that front. So, cheers for being patient with me, um, getting these reviews out. I don't know how frequently they're going to be, but I am working on stuff as these come out. Sometimes I fall behind and the album passes its relevancy, but I was never going to miss a new Blind Guardian album, so there you go. Hope you enjoyed this album. If you don't enjoy it, I think I probably understand exactly where you're coming from. I'll probably go and get more into this beast. But yeah, Blind Guardian being amazing, and credit for doing something completely different. Not a lot of bands are brave enough to do that these days. Hope you enjoyed this review. Hope you stick around for more stuff. Check out our other stuff as well if you feel so inclined. And I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.